Do you love watching television? If you're on a fixed budget, you need to make this free call right now to Dish and find out how you can get a fixed monthly price to watch all the television you want for 3 full years. In addition to a 3-year price guarantee, you can also get free monthly movie rentals. They give you one free movie rental every month. That's a $165 value, yours free. Plus, get free in-home tech visits, no-cost equipment replacements, a free voice remote, and you can watch commercial-free TV. Even access all your favorite apps to stream like Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube, and more. Now is the perfect time to call Dish. Take advantage of the 3-year price guarantee. Save yourself some money, and all your equipment is free. Call right now.
800-478-5560. 800-478-5560. 800-478-5560. That's 800-478-5560. Paid for by NPS.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
Freedom and equality. These words are the real battlegrounds where America's future is going to be decided. Ron DeSantis tells us that Florida is free, yet he uses the power of government to ban books, to undermine private businesses, and to impose a form of official thought throughout the state.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath, Saturdays at 1 p.m.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley. July 4th holiday travelers are putting up with a lot this week. Airline delays and cancellations, smoky air from those wildfires in Canada, and brutal heat.
A heat wave that has killed at least 14 people in Texas and Louisiana is expected to be centered over the Mid-South by the weekend. David Roth, forecaster with the National Weather Service, says it's only going to get hotter.
The kind of weather you want to stay indoors or be in an air-conditioned place, you drink lots of water.
Heat index levels of up to 112 degrees are forecast in parts of Florida over the next few days. I'm Donna Warder.
Despite the heat, millions of Americans are traveling for the July 4th holiday weekend. The AAA says the best time to travel by car today is before 10 or after 6. The Supreme Court isn't done yet. Yesterday, a decision striking down affirmative action in college admissions, declaring race cannot be a factor. And now, the High Court's expected to announce more major decisions before going on summer break. The AP's Lisa Dwyer.
On gay rights, that case involves a Christian graphic artist from Colorado who wants to begin designing wedding websites, but objects to making wedding websites for same-sex couples. The justices have already released important decisions this week on other issues, including affirmative action, voting rights, and religious rights.
The U.S. has flown nuclear-capable bombers to the Korean Peninsula this morning, its latest show of force against North Korea. France is struggling to restore order after a third night of unrest following a police shooting that killed a 17-year-old during a traffic stop. One of the world's oldest newspapers is ending its daily print run today after more than
100
Jackson. Years.
Is it okay if I confirm Pastor Wilson's phone number with you? Because I just called it and I don't know if that was her.
This is AP News.
Let me send you
the desperate need.
because we're on. I'm up on. I can't do
The
that
head
that
of
way.
the
Okay.
Children's
So let
No
me
worries.
send this to
says
you.
close to half of Haiti's
Oh, yes, you're right. Thank you. Yes.
UNICEF, the executive director, Catherine Russell, says that's an estimated 5.2 million people, including 3 million children.
Okay.
She emphasizes thousands of young Haitians face staggering levels of gender-based violence too, including the rape of young girls. Russell says Haitians and our team in the country tell me it's never been worse than it is now. Unprecedented hunger and malnutrition, grinding poverty, a crippled economy, and a massive insecurity that creates a deadly downward spiral of violence. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Montreal's canceled Saturday's Canada Day fireworks because of air quality concerns from those wildfires in Quebec. The wildfires have much of the U.S. and parts of Canada in a smoky haze. I'm Nita Foley, AP News.
The home number
This is
that I'm
8:20
sending you,
a.m.
you can try
WCPT
the
Yellow
home
Springs,
and the mobile.
streaming worldwide at
Okay. Thank you.
Okay?
We are
I'm
Chicago's
resending the
progressive
numbers
talk,
to you.
where facts matter.
But try the home and the mobile, please.
Perfect. Do you want me to try the home first?
Either way, hon, just get on the phone. Okay?
Sounds great.
Thanks so
From
much.
the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see a few spotty showers and thunderstorms possible late today. Otherwise, a blend of clouds and sunshine develops, a high in the low 90s. Winds out of the southwest around 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tonight, a chance for showers and thunderstorms, cloudy, a low near 70. Saturday, chance for showers and storms, cloudy, high of 85 degrees. Then on Sunday, a chance for showers and storms, high of 78. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 70.
Serving part-time in the Army National Guard has led to a lot of firsts for me.
Also, wait 5 minutes, by the way.
I received
Okay,
made
5
it
minutes?
possible for me to be the first person in my family to go to school and graduate debt-free. That education helped get me to the first day at my dream job, a job that I can still hold while I serve part-time. That job, plus the other benefits possible from the Army National Guard, helped me become a first-time homeowner. Also, part of my role as a National Guard soldier means I know that I can be one of the first to respond and help my community if disaster ever strikes. I'm extremely proud that I get to serve my community, and that first step I took by joining the Army National Guard has made all the difference in my life. Talk to your local recruiter or visit nationalguard.com to find out what firsts are available to you in the Army National Guard.
Sponsored by the Illinois Army National Guard, aired by the Illinois Broadcasters Association and this station.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003.
Right. I have her on the line, and I'm pulling up the Facebook to check levels on there.
Regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action.
Okay, Reverend?
Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury.
Hello,
Yes.
Jeanette. Hey, I need you out by about 6:20, okay?
Caring for Victor.
And we'll call you back at
And when am I
coming on?
Caregiving is taking
At
care of
6,
herself.
at about
I just
6:15
didn't
to
want
do
to
the
forget that I also had goals and
to
that
do
I
the
also
good
had a
news,
life.
and then
What
we'll
I
bring you
did
back
is
on
I
at 6:30 with the group.
Victor to meet me halfway.
I'm gonna do
They're almost
good news now.
No, you'll do the good news at 6:15 like I normally do.
Okay.
We
can Okay.
feel that journey.
So,
And I'll
so
bring you
I
out
stay
at
on
6.
or you call me back?
Well, it's your choice.
Visit AARP.org.
It doesn't matter.
All right. Everyone sounds good
Okay,
on the
well then
Facebook.
he'll work that out with you, okay?
Journey and better care for your loved one and yourself.
If you want to stay, that's fine, and we'll put you on mute. All right?
Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the last of this show together.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
I believe we have about 2 minutes, but I will run and check real quick.
Okay, thank you.
Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Pre-diabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop pre-diabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning, the cat is loose on that countdown.
Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
All right. We have 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Local 265.
Yes. Let's have a great show.
Okay, absolutely.
November when the Workers' Rights Amendment passed. There are some who believe that this was for the sole benefit of unions. Although unions brought it to the
Hey,
table
Jeanette?
and did it for the benefit of all workers across our state.
Jeanette?
If you work at a coffee shop,
Is
a
Jeanette
sheet
there?
metal shop, or a
Is
corporate
Reverend,
office,
is Pastor Wilson
all
there?
workers deserve a safe and respectful workplace.
She should be.
Living wage to
Pastor
raise their
Wilson?
families, affordable and expansive health insurance to protect their families. In addition,
Okay, just make sure you're not on mute, because when I need to pivot. Otherwise, if I don't hear you, I'm going to pivot to something else, okay?
Legislation that continues to negatively impact
But
across
what
many other
if you
states,
can
including lowering wages,
make sure
and
you
unsafe
are
working
people to the convention? That's what
There
I've
was a
been
lot
doing.
of buzz when this amendment was up for a vote, but I believe the real buzz should
Okay.
be now. Let's celebrate a win for the working class. Learn more about us at smart265.org.
The Takedown with Cliff Schechter.
1 minute.
so much amazing Biden successes.
Thank you. Okay, let's have a great show. And if the printer is still going, put me on mute when Reverend Wilson is on, okay?
All right, we'll do.
Thank you.
In nearly 3 decades, included in the more than $13 billion package, enhanced background checks for gun buyers under 21.
Republicans have run a dishonest and constant campaign to which the mainstream media has bought in. Crime, there's some sort of crime wave. Most cities in the blue states are safer because of gun policies. Joe Biden is proof of that. He passed the Violence Against Women Act. He brought people together and got Mitch McConnell to sign off after some of these horrific shootings last summer on the broadest, well, the only gun control legislation in about 30 years. Joe Biden has been huge on this issue where Donald Trump was a complete failure.
Hear more from Cliff at heartlandsignal.com and subscribe to his YouTube page.
This is WCPT.
Stand by.
Where
Thank you.
facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is the 4th of July weekend. This will be, according to the FAA, the most heavily traveled day of the season. So everybody, please be safe because we've seen a lot of delays, and a lot of people have not been very happy about these delays, and that's understandable. We'll just, we need to reach out to Pete Buttigieg, who is the Secretary of Transportation, to see what the deal is, because there's a lot of speculation about a lot of things. So I want to know from you about affirmative action. It is not race-based admission. Let's get that straight. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is not race-based admission. It is race sensitive, race conscious. It is a race considered. That's really the best way to put it. Race, among other factors, is the consideration. But the first thing that you must be is qualified to attend the school. And that's not the case with legacies. The legacies, indeed, Senator Tim Scott, Republican presidential candidate, has called for an end to legacy admissions. Indeed, at Harvard, you as a new applicant have about 3.4% of those who are new applicants are admitted to Harvard. But 33% of legacies are admitted to Harvard. We say that again. If your parents have not gone to Harvard, none of your forebears, if you are just a new applicant to Harvard, you are part of 3.4% who will be admitted. 33% of those who are admitted to Harvard are legacies. So there has been a quiet fight to favor alumni children. That is the headline in the New York Times. Yale boasted that it had students from 48 states, 68 countries, 1,221 high schools. 51% of their class identified as students of color. Yet, as they promote that, the college has clung to an admissions tradition, legacy preferences that mostly benefit students who are white, wealthy, and well-connected. Of the incoming students, 14% were the offspring of a Yale graduate. So we need to, why we're not focusing on that today, and why these lawsuits did not consider that, well, but power protects itself. So let that be part of your conversation today, the role that legacies play in this fight for a piece of the American pie. Indeed, affirmative action is still used in countries all over the world, but somehow or another, it is not being used in America today. That is to say, race considered. Race, among many factors, is a consideration. At least it was as of yesterday. And now, because of Clarence Thomas and his own sense of, it's a sense of inferiority, quite frankly, because he said, this stood in my way. This stood in my way. People thought I was only admitted because I was black. Yeah, you were admitted because you were black. And you were barred because you were black for many, many generations. That too You were given wide sway to get in because you were a white man for endless generations since before the founding of the Republic, because the existence of Harvard and William and Mary predate the founding of the Republic. So there's that. And affirmative action was always a conservative Republican remedy to try and overturn all of these generations of racism and bias against Black people. So everybody, let's talk about that today. I want to hear what your thought is, and not just Black people. The greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women. And of course, there was a stinging rebuke, a stinging dissent from Ketanji Brown Jackson. So we got a lot to talk about today. I want to hear your thoughts. Call me, because this is going to change how we live, everybody. It's going to change how we live, because it's the universities, and then Pastor Jeanette Wilson. It's going to be government contracts. It's going to permeate every part of American life. So let's talk about that today on the Santita Jackson Show. Indeed, these are the headlines. Let's take it away. Let's take it away, Henry. The Supreme Court says colleges and universities can no longer take race into consideration as a specific factor. That is, unless you are at a military school. Isn't that interesting? A landmark decision that overturns long-standing precedent historically benefiting Black and Latino students in higher education, and white women, I might add, to this report. However, the ruling still allows colleges and universities to consider an advocate's discussion of how race has affected their life, as long as it is concretely tied to, quote, quality of character or unique ability, close quote, that the applicant possesses. We're going to see what all this means. Dissenting members of the High Court insisted it would still make it practically impossible for colleges to consider race at all. Civil rights leaders and education advocates say the ruling will be damaging to educational institutions, and on and on and on it goes. Call us at 773-763-9278. 773-763 WCPT. Everybody, want to hear what your thoughts are today about this. More than 400 people were arrested in France yesterday as a wave of protest swept the country for a third straight night following the fatal police shooting of a teenage boy that was captured on video. Unrest broke out Tuesday night, just hours after a police traffic stop in France resulted in the killing of a 17-year-old named Nahel. The incident has raised questions about whether racism played a role in his death and whether the police officer who shot him was acting illegally. In Chicago, it's another hazy day, and I want to know how you're dealing with this air quality. Indeed, I've seen many reports where people are smelling something strange in the air, so they said it's not just poor air quality, it's what's in the air. Is it, do we have plastics in there? There's a lot that's going on, everybody. So I want to hear what your thoughts are and how you're coping. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 88 degrees. It'll be mostly cloudy or hazy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 89 degrees, partly cloudy. In Major League Baseball, the Twins will be playing the Orioles. Phillies 3, the Cubs 1. The Guardians will be playing the Cubs today. The White Sox 9, the Angels 7. And the White Sox will be facing off against Oakland today. In the WNBA, the Sparks will be playing the Sky, and the Sky will be facing off against the Fever on Sunday. The Lynx 99, the Storm 97. The Lynx will be facing off against the Mercury over the weekend tomorrow. And in soccer, Orlando City will be facing off against Chicago, and Minnesota will be facing off against Portland. Let's get some of these headlines out of the way. I'm so glad we were able to do that. But now we need good news. Pastor Jeanette Wilson, what is the good news today?
Good morning, Santita. I just thought we ought to look at the Bible. The prophet Isaiah talks about a time similar to ours where there's so much strife, so much oppression. And so if you look at Isaiah, the 58th chapter, it says, there's a whole thing about fasting and how people have, well, I've been fasting, I've been going to church, I've been worshiping you. And then when you get down to verse 6, this is what God says. It's not this kind of fasting I have chosen. This is the kind of fasting that I have chosen. Loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke to set the oppressed free and break every yoke, which is a song that many gospel choirs sing. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor and the wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked to clothe them and not to turn them away from your own flesh or blood? So part of why, we wonder why so much stuff is going on. I just don't know, where is God? Well, God is saying, you and I have not been properly focused on what it is God expects us to do. When you look at the Supreme Court decision yesterday, and the ones that may come down today, you got to ask yourself, those people that say they are believers in our God, how is it that we're not breaking the yoke of oppression? Why we're not striving to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, increase the income for workers? Why aren't we focused on making sure that everybody has access to high quality education without regard to race, creed, or sexual orientation? How is it that we have students that graduate with more student loan debt than any country on the planet, and yet we say we're the greatest nation in the world? And so God is saying, I will honor you if you are focused on the things that matter to me, and God is focused on justice. And so I think that this time that we're in is just a time that allows us to really reflect on the genuineness of our worship. And so that means to us in our neighborhoods, our wards, what are we doing to break the yoke of oppression? What are we doing to make sure that the hungry people where we are fed, particularly children? What are we doing to fight for adequate shelter for everyone, to eliminate tent cities in our city so that everyone has a decent, clean place to live? What are we doing? What are we thinking about in our churches and in our worship centers? And so the good news is we have the power. And God is saying, I'm watching you. I'm watching what you do, not what you say. And I'm watching why you do what you do. And I'm watching how you treat the least of these, individually and collectively, as a city, a state, and even a nation.
Let me ask you this very quickly, because you're also the head of Push Excel, the education program at Rainbow Push. How do you, before we bring you back at the bottom of the hour, how do you expect this Supreme Court decision where race-considered admissions is now out the window? And will it stop with education?
Well, I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on student access to institutions of choice. Even though they're qualified, they will be denied admission to many of these so-called great institutions. And I think that it will push more African-American students back to the base that we started with many years ago, where we could not get into Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. We went to our own Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. We went to Howard. We went to Hampton. We went to Tuskegee and other HBCUs. And so I said, I think it will increase the relevance of HBCUs, where our students will get the kind of high-quality education and the nurturing that many of them need and deserve. I also think that we're going to have to look at this whole question of the legacies, the legacy admissions. We've never challenged them directly, and we must do that. This Supreme Court, however, says to us, this is what happens when we don't focus on voting for senators. We allow the Senate to swing to the far right, and so the court is to the far right as the Senate and the presidency. The senators affirm the recommendations of the president, and they follow the dictates of their party leaders. And somehow we don't seem to focus on the power moves that have been happening. When Trump was in power, he appointed most of your federal judges where many of our Supreme Court justices hail from. And so the court is speaking to the masses of people who follow this ideology of the Aryan race and white supremacy.
But also, remember, It was during the Obama administration that the senator from the great state of Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, blocked Merrick Garland from getting on the Supreme Court. So this did not begin with Trump. I think it's important for us to understand what Trump is. A lot of things reached fruition under him, but this has been a 50-plus year march to dismantle affirmative action. It's been a 50-plus year march. We saw this coming when the Bakke decision came down in 1978. We saw this coming. So let us be very, very clear. Indeed, Senator Tim Scott, Republican presidential candidate, said it's time for us to look at legacies. It's time for us to end that. Let me read this to you, Reverend attorney Jeanette Wilson. The class of 2025, their acceptance rate was 3.43%. But guess what? The children of alumni, their acceptance rate is 33%. Okay, now there is a study on Harvard that finds that 43% of white students are legacy athletes and they're related to donors or staff. Indeed, Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, was considered to be an average student. And at his school, which was an elite Jewish school in New Jersey, that had, and it's important to understand this because they had a very, very high acceptance rate of kids who went into the Ivy League. When he was accepted into the Ivy League, when he was admitted to Harvard, after his parents gave the school more than $2 million, I can hear something in the background. After that, his school lodged a complaint. They said he does not deserve to be there. So wait a minute, 43% of white students at Harvard, and we're only looking at Harvard because Harvard's the big cheese, right? Everybody wants to get in there. And you know, it's ironic. My father said to me when I was applying to college, because I already had my full scholarship to Howard and Miss Spelman, he said, sadly, you will find that people will be more impressed with you when they find out that if you get accepted to Harvard, baby, they're going to be more impressed with that than your education from Howard, should you choose to go there, or Spelman. And do you know, 40 years later, that is absolutely true. It's tragic. But you know what? We're going to have to appreciate the institutions that we have built. And, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, here we are. 43% of white students at Harvard are legacy. They're athletes. They're related to donors or staff. They have a 3% acceptance rate, but 33% of students who are legacy are accepted. That is something that the corporate media has not discussed. And they need to discuss that. The people who are given preferential treatment to these Ivy League institutions and to these elite public institutions are legacies. Their mothers, their fathers, or their relatives went there. They're legacies. They're the ones who are favored. So when I see Clarence Thomas, and I saw this biography of him on PBS, where they went over his life. They went over his life and Jenny Thomas's life, Reverend Wilson. And he went in to see President Reagan, and he was literally almost bowing to him as he walked out the room. I'm so honored to be with you. And he literally was bowing. He was like, he just kind of nodding forward. I'm so honored. I'm so honored. Really? You know, my Yale degree is worthless because I'm Black. You're assuming that your Blackness makes you inferior. And see, it is infuriating to me. But you know what? I think this is something we need to see. I've got 1 minute before we go to break. Reverend Wilson.
Well, I think obviously we have to really look at this whole legacy issue. But the thing is, what's most interesting to me is we built the institutions that we think are the greatest institutions in the world. Our slave ancestors built them, serviced them, and yet they denied us access to them. Mm-hmm. And that's not right.
It's not right, but I'm glad we have Hampton. I'm glad we have Howard. I'm glad we have North Carolina A&T. I'm glad we have Morehouse, because you know what, and Fisk, and on, because
and
those
Spelman,
are the schools,
and
Spelman and Jackson State, and the Southern Classic, and FAMU. I'm glad about all of that, because you know what, I didn't get my freedom from Harvard. I got my freedom from Morehouse, from Fisk, from North Carolina A&T. And that's where I got my freedom from. You did too. Red, yellow, black, brown, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. And that's where you got your freedom from. It didn't come from Harvard, because Harvard was telling me that I was inferior. And if you hear my emotion today, it is real. Because when I understand the politics of what happens with legacies, and I don't have a problem with legacies, but you mean to tell me that a new applicant is 10 times less likely to get into one of these, to Harvard? 10 times less likely. 10 times less likely than a legacy. When George Bush goes to get an honorary degree and he's speaking as the president, he is laughing. I don't know how I got into Yale.
He knows how he got in.
No, I mean, he was laughing about it. He was laughing about it.
Oh, absolutely.
But Clarence Thomas, who was qualified to go there? Whatever you feel about his politics, he was qualified, but he also has a sense of inferiority. So he felt that, I'm more than black. No, you are black first, and you had higher hurdles to leap over, my friend. The last 30 seconds are yours. Oof.
Well, when we come back from break,
just stay on.
Well, I want everybody to know we're going to have a heated discussion about this in our student summit that we're holding during the upcoming Rainbow Push Convention on July the 17th. The convention is July 15th through the 19th, but on the 17th, that Monday afternoon, students need to meet us at the University of Chicago campus, where we're going to have this powerful discussion. Does race matter? Does it make a difference in admissions, or should it make a difference in your admission to school?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk. That's right. And do not beat up on the Asian community. The Asian, they are as split as black people are. There's some black folks who feel that I don't need this boost. Yeah, you do. But some of our greatest allies in this struggle are people from the Asian community, from the AAPI community. So don't beat up on them. They didn't do this. A supremacist thinking did this. And we got to deal with that. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Jeanette, I'm hot about this. You know,
you hot today?
Well, yeah, I am, because I've been doing a lot of research on legacies for years. And because when they told my mother, Mrs. Jackson, your daughter got in spite of her father. I'm like, are you serious right now? Now, I always, your father. Oh, yeah, because his politics were objectionable to them. I get it. But I'm like, wait. My mother, went off on this lovely.
I know she went postal on that.
Yes, she did. She said, I'm supposed to pay you? And then you're going to have me send my child up here to fight your battles? And I bring this up, everybody, because, I learned a lot in that experience. Because honestly, I'd never intended to go there. My father, though, did not want me to miss the opportunity. He saw me throwing at college applications away. Because as a merit scholar, you're recruited as heavily as Division I athletes are. They come to your school, they try to take you out of class. I mean, all of that, and you get all of these offers for scholarships. Now, my parents, even though, relatively speaking, they didn't make a whole lot of money, but I couldn't get a scholarship from these places. But Howard Scholarship and Spelman Scholarship was merit-based. If you had grades, if you had test scores, if you had, you got the scholarship. They acknowledged that. But what really angers me is what's not making this discussion, Jeanette. The legacies. If you're a new applicant to Harvard,
that's what I immediately said.
I'll send you a whole gaggle of these articles. But there's several books on it. And I've been reading those as well.
That's the issue. That the first thing I said, you're going to change the whole ruling and talk about we cannot use race as a factor. You've been using legacy since the beginning of time.
And they've been using race as a factor too. Hello?
No, but
The white race to favor them. 43% of white students at Harvard are legacy athletes and they're related to donors or staff. What?
And wait a minute, no qualification.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
Hi, we have Dwight McKee, Daryl Jones, Reverend Dr. Yuri Todd, and Chappelle Wells ready to go. Also, we have,
Reverend Dr. Yuri.
yeah, sorry.
No. Okay, I'll bring Chappelle on very quickly.
Perfect.
Mrs.
And we have a
Wells.
minute and a half.
Thank you so much. Let me do a quick line check. Daryl.
Good morning.
Hey, Todd.
Good morning.
Dwight.
Morning.
Okay, very good. Chappelle, you're there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. We're going to have Congressman Jackson, everybody, up at the top of the hour. He had sent me some information about this. He said, this was a little more than a month ago. He said, be real clear. This is going to be the story in a minute. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. He said, if the Supreme Court's going to bring it up, they're about to take it out. Thank you, Johnny. Oh my gosh. So, but it's good to have you all here this morning. And I'll be moving people around so that we can continue to open up the phone lines to people. Okay, and Todd, if you would, and everyone, please push the convention. That's just give it a quick hit. July 15th through the 19th. Okay?
All right.
Okay, very good. Because we're going to have a discussion about this. But Jeanette, don't limit it to Monday. Just say this is a discussion we'll be having throughout the convention. Because you're head of Push Excel.
Stand by. About to come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am free.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to see you today, right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet Walter and Kenneth. And let me see who else is. Dave Dowling and Lorraine, how you doing? And Susan Garner from LA. I got my LA people coming in. I love it. And we have got so many of you coming in. Raphael, how you doing, sweetie? And I want you to weigh in today on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends. Let's talk about affirmative action. Affirmative action is something that is holding in countries all around the world, but not in the United States today. No longer will you have race as a consideration in the admissions process. Wow. So what will that mean, everybody? Let's talk about it. 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. And what about legacies? They're not making the conversation. Senator Tim Scott said it's time for us to look at legacies and end it. Indeed, if you are an applicant to Harvard, their acceptance rate for the class of 2025 was 3.4%, but their acceptance rate for legacies, 33%. There was a Harvard study that came out about 4 years ago that found that 43% of white students there, 43%, are legacies, athletes, and they're related to donors or staff. Let's talk about that. Somebody's getting a preference, but Black and brown students will not. What about women? The greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are women. Call me at 773. Call us at 773-763-9278. Of course, that's Attorney Daryl Jones, Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, Esquire, Dwight McKee, and Pastor Jeanette Wilson, who we carried her from Good News over into this because this is of such great moment. But we've got these vittles. It's NASCAR weekend. July 2nd is when we're having the big race. It's going to be exciting. But you're making up some vittles for that. Is there any space for anybody to get anything from you, Chappelle, from Celebrations by Us?
Yes, Santita, we still have a few slots for 4th of July. So give us a call at 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. We'll be cooking up your ribs, your pork chops, your hamburgers, your hot dogs, as well as your Italian sausage, your hot links, and your spaghetti, mac and cheese, your baked beans, whatever it is that you need for your holiday table. Don't hesitate to give us a call, 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
I love it. Did you say pork chops? You know how I love pork chops. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. And of course, I can say it for Reverend Dr. Yuri. He wants his banana pudding. He'll be here in another couple.
Hey, Chappelle.
Hey.
All the training that he has is just going out the window.
Something.
Please make him something.
How come he gets banana pudding and the rest of us don't?
Girl, because he's a preacher. You're a preacher, but you ain't a preacher. Like
Reverend Wilson, I'm drinking.
I am a preacher that loves banana pudding, Chappelle.
There is no
You
evidence.
can't
of
go
that.
all the way to Baltimore and not hit Chicago.
No, she gave Reverend Jackson and Reverend Yuri a spread, and he has not gotten over it. Not yet. Ain't that tragic? Pitiful. So every time he hears Chappelle, he's like, don't forget me. Let's get to this discussion, because boy, oh boy, the Supreme Court says that colleges and universities can no longer have race as a consideration. Indeed, you hear the corporate media saying that this is race-based admissions. That's not true. It's race-considered admissions. The first consideration is that you must be qualified to apply to the school. That's not being discussed in corporate media. Be clear on that. Every person who is admitted using affirmative action, first, they're qualified to be there. You can't say that about kids who are legacies. Many of them are qualified, many are not. Being a legacy gets you a leg up. 3.4% of the new applicants at Harvard, those people who were not legacy students, they were admitted this year. That's right. But 33% of legacy students were. 43% of white students are legacy athlete, and they are related to donors or staff. That's Harvard. Okay. So let's look at who really has the leg up. So let's get right into this. We've been talking with you, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, but we've got Dwight McKee, we've got Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, we're going to have Congressman Jonathan Jackson on at the top of the hour. Let's start with you, Attorney Darrell Jones. Whew, what do you think of this?
Wow, Santita, we expected, some badness to come out of the Supreme Court, but what came out of this opinion is just amazing. It's some of the worst stuff that you could imagine. Look, here's what comes out of this opinion. They try to say that, in essence, that racism, for the most part, doesn't exist in education in the United States, and therefore it shouldn't play any pivotal role in making decisions with regards to those that are admitted into the universities, to Harvard, as well as in the University of North Carolina. And when you go through this case and you understand the history of the University of North Carolina and the history of Harvard, it just becomes so incredibly clear that the court is off. I mean, they're just so far away from where they should be. In this case, University of North Carolina, that's a school that was built by enslaved labor. A school that was forced to admit blacks after Brown versus the Board of Education, and really didn't admit the first black woman until 1963. And so when we start looking at all this and understanding that they were still fighting integration in the 1980s, so when we look at this and we start trying to decipher what the Supreme Court was trying to do in this case, this was a situation where the Supreme Court, where the majority of the Supreme Court went into this case with a conclusion where they wanted to be, and then tried to find law to back it up to get to where they wanted to be. And it's a horribly written case. It's a horribly decided case. And it's going to have an incredible impact on students of color that are coming from many of the zip codes where they don't have the access and the resources to be able to really study and do all the work necessary to academically achieve, when they're now being considered for admissions, whether or not their circumstances should be considered, whether or not the racism that they've encountered should be considered. This is the problem that exists within this case, and my fear is that it starts in this educational realm, and now it's going to trickle through other aspects of decisions and programs that are in place to correct historical wrongs that Black and brown people have experienced in this country. That's the big overview of what I see happening from this case. And there's a lot that that hopefully we're going to get a chance to dive into, because my goodness, when we start talking about the Equal Protection Clause and the Unequal Protection Clause that now that this court has put in place, it's horrible. It's simply a horrible decision.
No, it is a horrible decision, and it's an interesting one because no one's talking about legacies. And you are a military veteran yourself. No one's talking, Reverend Dr. Yeary, about military academies, which were exempted from this. Isn't that interesting? Reverend Dr. Yeary.
Good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues. It's interesting in a probably not so interesting way. It is curiously, again, by design. What we saw come from this Supreme Court was a further social engineering, if you will, of the insulation of white entitlement by using and manipulating persons of color against each other. It is the most effective and insidious form of social engineering that we often see in the courts. And this time it was done quite effectively, not to protect the interest of access to Asian students who somehow thought they were displaced by an African-American student who might have been admitted. They failed to argue that a legacy student who did not have to meet those same requirements and ended up with a greater consideration because of their legacy status. They are likely the ones that took their place because there wasn't necessarily the same rigor to meet the baseline requirements to qualify for whatever admission is. So they're really arguing about how do you create a hierarchy, a racial hierarchy of those who are already in kind of an elite pool of considered candidates. You made the cut. Now within the cut, there's a further distinction that speaks to this need for a diverse student body. And because one racial minority group not get in, they believe it's due to another less qualified racial minority group applicant getting in, and never points back to what this really does in the way the court has framed its ruling, is that because now race as a suspect category can no longer be considered, and it was raised under Title VI, right? So Title VI says no program receiving federal funds can discriminate on the basis of race. It's very interesting that this is a Title VI complaint, because I've seen Title VI as probably the one last arm of federal law that we could use to address racial disparities, disparate impact. So that was interesting part number one. Number two, and I'm sure we'll talk about this all day. We're going to talk about it, especially during the Rainbow Push International Convention that starts July 15th and runs through the 19th. Everybody ought to be there because this is going to be premier amongst the conversations. Is the way that Chief Justice Roberts, contorts history and detaches the 14th Amendment from its racial context that was very precise, and then somehow glosses over that the remedy that the 14th Amendment was supposed to produce still did not exist. He never touches that. He just gets us to this place that in this fictional fairy tale, that because we have this complaint that raises an issue amongst two subgroups, if you will, within the American fabric, that the need for the 14th Amendment coming out of the Civil War is one of the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, that somehow or other that is no longer relevant today. Therefore, because this interior fight, this down the road fight, raises an issue, it allows us to just ignore that we still haven't fixed what the 14th Amendment was supposed to address, and therefore we should now just pretend that none of that stuff happened over here. Let's just put the blinders on and go forward, because in the end, this is never about justice. This is the most sinister form of white supremacy you will ever see, because it is codified now in the law.
Absolutely. And Tracy Lewis, you say that legacy admissions were not on the docket and they're not what is on the menu. We are. I hear you. Trump said the ruling yesterday was a victory for America. Elections have consequences. Absolutely. But legacies are on the menu. No, they are on the docket. But because they are a protected class, Tracy, they are a protected class. We don't want to touch the most protected people of all. And that is the powerful in America. White people in America, white men in particular in America. White women are the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action. So no, so you don't misread what's happened here. You not only must you look at who's in the headlines, you have to look at who's been left out the headlines, who's been left out of the discussion because they're left out of the discussion because they're protected. Isn't it interesting that the military, well, they're protected too. No, everybody but the military schools. Really? Are you serious? Oh, so what did Ketanji Brown Jackson say? The boardroom? No, I can't get in there, but the bunker? Sure. Dwight McKee, your thoughts about this decision?
Well, I think that when you really look at the real impact, that the people that benefited most out of affirmative action and integration were white institutions. I mean, North Carolina got Michael Jordan out the deal and a national championship. They have been, San Francisco got Bill Russell out the deal and the national championship. They have really been the real beneficiaries of affirmative action and integration. And as you just said, white women, even in affirmative action, get most of the contract. And so I think what affirmative action always was set up to do was not create a floor for us, but creating for us. So we have never gotten past, in most communities, most cities, 40, 50, 60% of the population in, we've never gotten past 5, 10% of the contracts. Because the way it's set up is, we really kind of get the crumbs and white men split the cake. And then at $4 million, we have to get out of the program anyway. So you can only grow but so much in the program. I think it's an opportunity now for us to invest in black institutions, the ones that's gotten us as far as we've gotten. I think that Biden should take an initiative now to quadruple the financial commitment to black institutions. I think that we should emphasize going to black institutions like we went, the ones that got us this far. I think that we need to focus on our own business development, our own economy, and invest in ourselves. White people are never going to, in my opinion, most white people, not all, are never going to see us as equals, and they're always going to figure out how to give themselves a competitive advantage in every situation. And if we think they're going to do anything otherwise, we're in total conflict with history. And so I think now it gives us an opportune time to go back to the Booker T. Washington philosophy of self-help, self-development, Elijah Muhammad, do for self. I think that's what our new focus should be. I think that this has been an illusion for the most part. That this affirmative action thing has been an illusion, and it's really kind of confused us and had us working against ourselves in some situations.
Well, I think Dr. King was talking about working for yourself, taking care of yourself. I mean, that has been, I think, the tradition of the civil rights movement. All we asked was that we have the opportunity to have our tax dollars have as much weight on our side of town as they do on the white side of town. The fact is, integration is somebody else's fight. Black people can never integrate because even with Mariah Carey, this great singer, this beautiful voice. But they looked at her and they said, she's white. She sounds black. Oh, wait a minute. She looks kind of, so she's black. It's the drop of black blood, everybody. That is always at issue. We heard from you just a little bit before on the other side of the break. I'm gonna come back to you, Reverend Wilson, but I wanted to bring on the tax doctor. He wanted to weigh in, and you can respond to him and everything you've heard, Reverend Wilson. Caller, what's on your mind?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm a veteran too, and when I heard that they left out the military, I said, "What a joke! What a joke!" I just don't understand Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, you
and
do.
The fact
Yeah,
that
well,
we have,
tax man, you do. You understand him real well.
Well, we both there a good march. I know that much. But let me say this. We live here in Illinois. We have 859 school districts. In Cook County, we have 140 school districts. And 3 of the school districts up north have more money than the other 137 combined. And when you look at the situation that the Supreme Court just created for us, and I keep telling folks in this state, it's time to break up these independent school districts because they are laden with racism and the fact that most of us who did not understand we had a constitutional convention in 1970, where one delegate stood up and said, "What about the exceptional student?"
Now, hold on. Taxman, you are absolutely right about that, but I need you to focus your remarks today on affirmative action. What do you think about that decision? Stay right there.
It is focused.
No, but focus, zero in now. Zero in, because I'm coming up on the break.
It is focused in on affirmative action, but if we don't understand the situation we have here in Cook County, we're going to be oblivious to affirmative action because, number one, we don't have the financial resources combined unless we have a statewide funding mechanism that makes schools equitable with equality.
Well, hold on.
That's something we don't have here in
Reverend
Illinois.
Wilson, why don't you respond to what you've just heard? Okay, I'm hearing something in the background. Everybody turn everything down because I can hear everything. All right, Reverend Wilson, got 2 minutes.
Well, I think that we should look at Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson gives us a real history of what has happened to African Americans in the United States and how his opinion is just contradictory to progress in terms of inclusion of African Americans. She talks about, it's not just a race factor. It is the fact that you have used race in every decision in this country, whether it is employment, whether it is in housing, whether it is in gerrymandering and drawing district lines for election to political office. All of this weighs heavily on how the court arrived at this decision. And as Dr. Yeary indicated, first of all, and she indicated in her dissent, Justice Jackson, the fact that, wait a minute, I have to read it. I just get so frustrated when I look at this stuff.
Okay, got 1 minute.
Both-sides race-based gaps exist with respect in the health, wealth, and well-being of American citizens. They were created in the distant past but have indisputably been passed down to the present day through generations. And what she simply said is, you have always used race, the white race, as a factor in housing, as a factor in employment, as a factor in admissions to any schools. This decision will have a tremendous impact on the admission of blacks to law schools, the admission of blacks and browns to law schools and to medical schools. And so it will impact, as Justice Sotomayor said, the number of African Americans and Latinos who will become doctors and lawyers to represent us, because we're not equal to our percentages of the population in terms of the professions.
You know, and I think we cannot emphasize enough that when you are an affirmative action baby, as Justice Sotomayor referred to herself as being, you are already qualified. That's what Clarence Thomas, God bless him, gets it wrong. It's his sense of, I can hear something in the background, everybody watch that. That's where he gets it wrong. And that's where most people get it wrong. Even that this is race-based admission, that's not true. It's race as a consideration among many others. But the first thing you gotta be, if you are going to be an affirmative action baby, is qualified. Start there. And America is poorer when you don't include everybody. You can't hurt me without hurting yourself. All the bright people in the world did not go to Harvard, and I emphasize, Dr. King went to Morehouse. Diane Nash Bevel went to Fisk. Those are my morning stars. The Greensboro Four went to North Carolina A&T. Reverend Jackson went to North Carolina A&T. Those are my morning stars. They're the ones who freed me. Booker T. Washington founded Tuskegee Institute. And on and on and on and on it goes. So I'm not begging to get into these schools. But the schools that I built, that my ancestors built, I shouldn't be excluded from them, particularly when they are favoring those who are legacies. You have a 3% chance of getting into Harvard if you were in the class of 2025, but a 33% chance of getting in if you were a legacy. Think about that. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, coming up in just a few minutes. Oh, everybody, please talk. We're on the we are on Facebook.
Yeah, and you know, Santita, I think that the caller was right on the mark when he was talking about, really based on the area that you come from, your zip code, the tax base that you come from, with regards to the investments that go into the schools. Because what happens with the analysis that this Supreme Court, in my opinion, is given, is that they're trying to say that we're at a point now where everyone is equal, and so all the numbers, all the standardized tests and all of that are being utilized are equal. That simply isn't accurate. This past summer, we were down in Houston with the Houston Independent School District, giving away banned books to the CUNY Homes community, which was a low-income community. And to hear this little 6-year-old black child say, and looking at his book, his amazement wasn't just the book, but that all the pages were there, that he could actually see all the pages of the book. So when you take that analysis as your foundational piece and then say, why can't you compete on the stage with everyone else who has everything? That's the piece that the Supreme Court misses in this analysis, is that it's just not equal. It's not an equal society. Everyone's not starting on third base, as they said of President Bush, former President Bush.
Anybody else have anything else? I don't think they're ignoring it, because Ketanji Brown Jackson had it right. Justice Jackson had it right. She said, "Look, you want me in the bunker, but you don't want me in the boardroom." I mean, if you notice, all of these black men who are being promoted in the military to head AFRICOM, to do all this, I'm like, what are you promoting them for? What are they going to do? While America's making this last grab at imperialism.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
Yes.
You have Congressman Jackson on the line.
Okay,
the Service
Reverend
Academy
Jackson?
question.
Hold on, let me welcome Congressman Jackson to the show. Congressman?
Hello, good morning. Hey, Santita.
Hey, sweetie, love you much.
Good morning.
Oh, no, Dad's not on with us today, Jonathan. Oh, okay. Okay. But I did have some people who were carryovers. I'm gonna have to let one or two of you go, because I've got to be able to get the calls in. But Congressman Jackson, I'm glad that you're joining us today. Reverend Wilson is with us, Dwight McKee, Attorney Jones, and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey. Y'all can say hello.
Hey, Ricky Todd.
Hello.
Hey, sir. How are you? I'm good. How are you?
So what do you make of Tim Scott pointing at legacies? What do you think about that, Congressman?
I didn't see that comment. What do you say?
That we should look at legacies now, because that's an issue. That's a problem. Yeah, I'll bring it up for you and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I can't hear. I don't know what's going on in the background.
Hold on, baby. That's me and my phone. I mean, that's me. Hold on. Let me send this to you. Okay. Okay. Let me send this to you. Put up this story. Wanted them to end legacy admissions. You know, the incoming class at Harvard in 2025, they had a 3.4% admissions rate for people who were not legacies, but a 33% admission rate for legacies. So I'm going to send this to you right now, Congressman.
That big an issue for me. But I think a lot of issues are being wrapped up in here. To me, it's about black and the private institution. God bless them. A lot of leeway to do what they want to do. Legacy, this, and that. But are we addressing what was a tool to help black folks for what we've been through? Now they put everybody in. There's too much in it.
Say that.
I mean, America's not indebted to a bunch of people, and rich people got a right to pass on their estates. I get all that, but
live in 2 minutes.
Blacks, what's an advancement tool for us?
Does anyone have a response to that? We have 2 minutes before we come up.
Well, I think that given the balance of power, alleged balance of powers in the country, we have to now initiate different kinds of legislation. The Supreme Court only interprets things. We need some legislation now that deals with moving past this idea of legacy admissions, but put some protections in, like we did with the Voting Rights Act, even though they keep challenging it. So we need some legislative action. And we need to begin to invest and support our HBCUs, where most of us are able to graduate and do well. But we still need to fight for the fact, our rights, since we built these institutions that we can't enter. It's crazy.
Well, I'm going to let you leave things off.
And I think we should take the criteria from race to
back in a minute
and census tracts, because there's provable discrimination, and that's where the government discriminated. The government literally took out a red pen and circled zip codes and census tracts.
Well, that's what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson looks at. All of the things that have impacted African Americans across the years. She goes through every aspect of it. And it is, as you say, zip code based because of housing. It also deals with whether or not you have access to capital zip code, whether you have access to high quality public education based on where you live, the funding for public education, zip code. So I think you're right.
Okay, everybody, stand by. Okay, and I can hear everything in the background. Remember that. So please make sure your background is quiet. Johnny, you making my macaroni and cheese?
Yes, that'd be lovely.
Todd, you want your banana pudding?
Can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, the second hour. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, is my home, as is AM 950 radio. the voice of progressive Minnesota up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. My love to Chad and my whole family up there. Gary Hines, I love you. Reverend McAfee, Spike, all of you. Love you, love you, love you. And of course, my morning stars here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Well, we're talking about affirmative action today. We've got Congressman Jonathan Jackson with us. And so I'm going to run through these headlines because I want to hear from you at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. Please join us at the Rainbow Push Convention. If you think that the movement is over, well, now you see that it is not, and that's why you need to be at the convention. July 15th through the 19th. You don't want to miss it. Go to rainbowpush.org and show up at the convention. You're not going to be turned away. And call us at 773-FREEDOM today. Let's get to some of these headlines. The top of the headlines, the Supreme Court says colleges and universities can no longer take race into consideration as a specific factor in admissions, a landmark decision that overturns long-standing precedent, historically benefiting Black and Latino students, and I might add white women, according to this report from CNN, although CNN excluded white women from that. The greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women. That having been said, that has been struck down. Let's talk about that. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 88 degrees, mostly cloudy. It is still a dangerously hazy. We don't know what's in the air. We want you to be careful, and you should be wearing masks when you're outside. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, 89 degrees, partly cloudy. Major League Baseball, the Twins will be playing the Orioles today. The Phillies, 3-1 over the Cubs. The Cubs will be facing off against the Guardians later on today. The White Sox, 97 over the Angels. They'll be facing off against Oakland later on today. In the WNBA, the Sparks will be playing the Sky, and then the Sky will be playing the Fever on Sunday. The Lynx 99 and the Storm 97. The Lynx will be facing off against the Mercury tomorrow. In soccer, the Orlando City team will be facing off against the Chicago Fire, and Minnesota will be facing off against Portland. Those are the headlines. Of course, joining this esteemed panel, Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Todd Deary, Esquire, and Attorney Darrell Jones, and Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Congressman Jonathan Jackson from the 1st Congressional District of Illinois. What do you make of this decision? I mean, to be fair, and to fully disclose, this is my brother, so he and I have these private conversations and on and on. And you did say to me to watch out, open my eyes, watch out for the affirmative action discussion, because in fact, okay, Henry, I need you to bring that music down if you're in there. But Congressman Jackson, what do you make of this decision?
It was gut wrenching, an absolute terrible blow. People use the analogy of this is they want to see Lady Justice colorblind. Well, I would tell you that they just gouged out the eyes of Lady Justice. When you are taking history out of law, when you are overturning these precedents of the will of the people, the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court justices that are not elected, those persons that were appointed by President Bush, that are standing outside of the progress that the legislators and voters have made, because it's rather capricious and whimsical. And you can narrow it down really to one thing, Santita. The Supreme Court makes broad decisions in the interest of balancing fairness. And it's curious that in the Bush v. Gore, they said this court case to determine who would be president can never be recited again or used as an example because they used some extraordinary measures. Now, essentially, they're doing the same thing when they say that the military, as a public institution, academia, will be set aside and will still be able to use all their affirmative action tools and goals for racial preferences and the like. But as for the public and private institutions for non-military, Harvard, the oldest private college, University of North Carolina, the oldest public college, you cannot use these tools. That's a contradiction. So I would tell you the way forward that I would share with President Biden is through the executive orders you have to make clear what the 14th Amendment is, because there is an opening that the Supreme Court has left.
Is there a legislative? So is that the legislative remedy? What would the executive order do, Congressman?
Make clear. So when there is the discrepancy in law in the interpretation between the 14th Amendment, equal protection, what you can do with a military institution for academia versus what you can do with a private institution or a public state institution for academia, the president has a lot of leeway and a lot of sway in dealing with an executive order to make clear the goals. So just simply enforce what the military institution of academia would do in the public and private academia and institution, since there seems to be some discrepancy. Should we fall under the should we go with the military's definition that the Supreme Court is upholding, or with the questionable tools that he's asking for the public and private sector institutions?
So what do you expect this to stop at education, or will this filter into government contracts and other areas of American life?
Santita, it's scary where this can go. First of all, I see historically black colleges would be on the chopping block. If this, in fact, is the law, how can you justify spending money in historically black colleges in these predominantly Republican-led state legislatures? Just how can you? It's race-based, it's race consciousness. And it's also very interesting on what you talk about as far as consciousness. They said you cannot consider race consciousness in these decisions. But you can be wealth conscious, you can be legacy conscious, you can be geographic conscious, you can be athletic conscious. The only issue was race consciousness. You can be gender conscious. I mean, so clearly it's so narrowly defined, and who is hurt? It's going to be disproportionately African American males. You can mark my words on that. Because even with African American females, they can say, I've got a woman and I've got a black.
So talk to me. I mean, because we see that the class of 2025 for Harvard, their admission rate was 3.4%, but the admission rate for legacies, 33%. I just sent you an article in which Senator Tim Scott has called for the end to legacy admissions. And now there's a Harvard study that shows that 43%, as you just pointed out, Congressman Jackson, 43% of white students are legacies, athletes, and they're related to donors or staff. Of course, you remember when Jared Kushner was accepted to Harvard, his school protested his admission. They said, wait a minute, your father and mother just gave them $2 million. We have so many kids who are typically admitted to Ivy League institutions. He's not qualified. But there you have it.
2 or 2.5 million. But Santita, I think the context in this matters, and I think the case was so poorly argued by one of our Asian brothers and by a white man. This has to do with black folks and a tool of remedy to offset all the negative actions that were taken against black folks for centuries. How do we get factored in a very conservative manner, growth into the economy? We weren't given homestead, we weren't given reparations, we weren't given anything, just free to wander, free to try to compete, and then had to fight to get equal protection under the law, and then to fight to get that enforced. This was a very conservative tool for persons and people in the community that's been injured and harmed repeatedly. And Tita, the same way I go out on the ag committee and see families that have had farms for 3 generations, 5 generations, 8 generations, and that wealth is passed down. There are people in their family and their intergenerational trauma that have persecuted black folks intergenerationally. You even have a case down in Mississippi now where an officer shoots a black man in the mouth just last month and sexually abuses him, and he gets fired. He's not charged. Some people traumatize black folks, and that's what they do. They can't help it. This was a tool to help us. So take off all the other issues. I know there's issues with a lot of other people, but America doesn't owe the students from a lot of Asian countries repair. This is an opportunity for them. It doesn't owe a lot of people. We're talking about the people that have actually been harmed by American policy that have fought in every war. So I think you have to narrowly focus what our argument is. That was not the argument that was put forth by the defendant in this case. They were talking about everything but black folks trying to be unconscious. Well, Santita, it's a melting pot. So if you, the example, but if you say it's a melting pot and, we want to be fair to everyone, by definition, the way you frame the question, it makes us look unfair because we're race conscious. No, we're not race conscious. We're race harmed and continue to be. And look at it today. Look at it in the housing. Cases in Baltimore and all around the country and in Chicago where there's been discrimination in bank lending. Look at arrest record. Look at expungement rates. Look at environmental racism where people put black houses on contaminated soil that we're still finding out about. I mean, it's very specific. Yeah, so Santita, black businesses are on the chopping block and historically black colleges. That's why we have to fight back. That's why I encourage people to come to the convention. We have more time to discuss this, and you get to meet allies that have the same interests so we can go forward.
It's very interesting that you continue to put black people forward in this. I mean, let me drill down on that for a hot second before I go to the rest of the panel and the callers. Congressman Jackson, why are you so focused, hyper-focused on black people? Because some people push back on that, and then there are many black folks who say, wait. We've been especially harmed. We need some special remedies. Please speak to that.
It's in any legal case that you can find. You injure someone, you sue them, you get some repair, you get to redress a few issues. It's very specific. And it doesn't hurt the whole society that one person's held responsible to repair the damages they've inflicted upon another person. You have to make it cut and dry and pretty clear. We're talking about the injuries. Affirmative action comes out of the GI Bill, offsetting decades, centuries of negative action. How do we get black folks that have fought in the war that don't have the right to vote? Black soldiers that fought for democracy abroad that didn't have the right to vote back at home. I think if you don't narrow and you aren't clear on who the parties are, then it gets very confusing quickly and it becomes irrelevant. If you're not putting race at the heart of this, and what was ultimately decided after they got through with their long arguments was a racial issue. And that's why I have so much respect for Ketanji Brown on her comments on, you can't bury your head in the sand and ignore race and think that's going to solve racism. Now you're going into denial. In TITA, there's so much history behind it. And if history doesn't matter, we unravel a lot of things, starting with the law. And why do we have certain foreign relations? And why do we have property rights? All this is enshrined in the law and in history. Let me tell you, digressing just a moment, I'm on the Ag Committee, and so I get an opportunity to see all these farms and farmers and so forth. And see that some of the wealth and things that I've seen is like mind-boggling.
What do you mean?
People that have, 10,000 acres. I thought an acre was a lot of land, and I thought having 30 acres was special and 100 was superior, and 1,000 is only what God had talked about in the Bible. When you start rolling up on estates with 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 acres, and realize families that have had their land in their name and in their family before their states were even incorporated. Hello? The intergenerational wealth.
Oh, wow.
And so how are we to compete? How are we to compete? And you're saying for the child, let me give you one other story. A friend of mine's rather successful, and he wanted to sponsor some scholarships for his alma mater. And stayed out of the process, so it would be clear the person won, then he went to meet them. And it's a white gentleman, and this was an African-American woman, a young lady that won the scholarship. after they announced her name in a very public setting, her father stood up and exclaimed. Her mother started crying uncontrollably, knowing their child's going to get their tuition paid for this elite school. The father fainted. They had to call an ambulance because he couldn't believe it. The mother, she finally calmed down and was so excited. He talked to the child, to the young student, and asked her, "Hey, what do you want? What can I do? I'm here for you." And he's ready to open his checkbook and give her, whatever she could possibly need. You know what the young lady asked for? A test prep book.
Wow.
He thought it was going to be computers and tutors and all the stuff his children have. No. He said, I know people have these test prep books and they're $100, $200. If I could get one, that could help me a lot.
Wow.
So how do we get in to participate is the question. Affirmative action was the tool. And it's still the tool for the military. It works. It worked in India. When India wanted to go beyond its caste system, and now one of the fruits of their labors and all this mind power that they're leading the world in, they implemented affirmative action. They set aside 20% of their classrooms in their elite institutions, their public colleges, for those that were in the caste, and in the lowest rung. It became so successful. Now it's been raised over the last 50 years to 50%. So they've moved forward by pulling in those communities that were marginalized and excluded and discriminated against historically. What's our alternative?
Well, either we rise or we fall together. Let me bring in a couple of these callers, Congressman. Ted, thank you for calling back. What's on your mind today, Ted?
Yeah, thanks. Hey, thanks, Santita. Good morning. And good to hear you guys. And I want to say, not to worry, because other than the Cubs and the Beatles, one of the most overrated entities in existence is the East Coast Ivy League education. It has gotten us basically into all the trouble that we're in now. The minority students are better off going through here. Let me give you an example for myself. Jesuit Catholic education. Far superior. Can't tell you how much I benefited from it. The black colleges, your other guests talked about them earlier. Quit pining for East Coast Ivy League education because it gets you hooked in to these power channels that cause all the problems. That's all that's what I'm hearing.
Ted, I hear you and I thank you for your comment. And have a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Be careful as you're out here in this haze. Mama D, what's on your mind today?
Well, how are you? Greetings. The ruling won't change for NAA, a racial group. They law when minorities consisting of countries and white women were added. Decision adds a new category, the new American, the twofold solution for slavery crimes against humanity and Jim Crow genocide is different from racial discrimination. And former slaves and former slave owners should unite in peoplehood and save the America that they're from spiritual and moral constitutional decay. NAAs are indigenous Native American Africans. So instead of demanding, instead of begging for affirmative action, we should be demanding reparations. Why aren't we doing that? That's my question.
Does anyone want to take that? Congressman Jackson, you want to look at that?
That's why H.R. 40 is on the table. It first starts with the study to codify. The nation's never taken the time to say these are the facts. Like to the letter of law that Ketanji Brown cited, it's been an ostrich. Stick your head in and just let the time go by. So I'm signed on to H.R. 40. John Conyers has initiated. Sheila Jackson Lee is currently championing that legislation. You're right, Mama D.
H.R. 40 is not good enough. That's a study. We done studied for 404 years. We don't need a study. we need action on reparations and not begging for affirmative action that benefited, as I said earlier, everybody but Indigenous Native American Africans who keep using the wrong language. A crime against humanity and Jim Crow genocide is different from racial discrimination. Why can't we get that through our head?
Okay. Well, Mama D, thank you so much for your comment. Congressman Jackson, I've got 1 minute before I go to break. Where do we go from here? I mean, I hadn't even thought about HBCUs being harmed because, in the prior segment, Dwight McKee said, this is our opportunity to build up our HBCUs. And a lot of people saying that. Attorney Jeanette Wilson said that. And you're saying, wait a minute, now they have a basis upon which they don't have to fund HBCUs. Wow.
Well, I think, and this is why we're talking, and I'm gaining insight from you, the opportunity, I agree with them 1,000%. I'm just saying the hurdle. If race-conscious, race-based admissions is a problem, that's going to affect race-conscious, race-based contracting in business, race-based schools, race-based, follow it through.
So where do we go from here? I've got about a minute.
Well, I would say that, Peter, this is 24 hours old. I'm talking with colleagues now. And thank goodness for the executive order that the president has. And we've got to share with him tools that he can use in his drawer to make clear what this law could mean. I think the opening is there because how can you have this that the military and the Supreme Court recognizes for our military institution? So we can go into the Army, and it's harder for us to get into the classroom than it is to become a CEO. So the pipeline to be a CEO is closing by way of the classroom, but the pipeline to go into the Army is wide open for advancement.
Ketanji Brown Jackson said it. She said, you have room for me in the boardroom, not in the bunker, but not in the boardroom. Stay right there, Dwight McKee. We're going to continue this conversation on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page, talking with Congressman Jonathan Jackson and this magnificent panel. Let's get at it, everybody. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show as we talk about affirmative action in just a minute. Whew. Dwight McKee?
Well, that's how you know these people playing games with us. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. It ain't that they ignorant of the law. It ain't that they are confused. They're playing games. And to have that we can go into the Army, the reason that they passed that situation is because the Army told them unless the people coming in the Army see themselves reflected in the leadership, we won't be able to attract people to the Army. And so we need an exemption in it so we can attract people to the Army, so we can keep fighting the wars to protect you all's supremacy. And so they made allowances for them when it's convenient and non-allowances when it's as convenient for them in other directions. The Native Americans say that these people speak with forked tongues. And what they were saying is that they will allow when it's convenient. They will do what they need to do to stay in charge. And so the remedy is not, I think, in coming up with strategic legislation or coming up with some strategy. The remedy is understanding first that these people have no intentions of us being able to compete with them in the world. That they want to be in charge. They have a supremacy complex, and is not going to let anybody compete with that, whether it's brown people, black people, Arab people, whosoever. And if they need 800 bases around the world to protect that, they're going to do that. If they need to drop a bomb on people of color, an atom bomb, they will do that. If they need to slay the natives to take their land, they will do that. if they need to hang black people from trees, they would do that. There is no limit to what they want. They would do to stay in charge. And so we need to start by understanding that. And then it becomes at least we're not as manipulatable as we are by believing that somehow they're going to supply the remedy to our situation.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Pastor Yeary, Reverend Dr. Yeary Esquire, Attorney Jones, Reverend Wilson.
The import of the conversation, I think,
back in a minute,
continuing to kind of set in. The discussion does need to firmly move and intentionally move to a more robust conversation around reparations, because there was an intentional detachment of the 14th Amendment from its context, from a court that claims to be originalist in its interpretation, that you interpret the Constitution and its amendments upon the common use of language at the time those parts of the Constitution were ratified. Well, that didn't happen here on yesterday. And it did not happen for 6 of the justices on the court, much to the chagrin and obvious outrage of 3 women, in a way that I think is important.
Back in 30.
Take note of. If you're going to read the decision, I would start with the dissent, so that you can at least get a proper framing of the issues before you read that gobbledygook of a ruling where the Chief Justice says, well, you can't assign a value to race, but you could have a situation where somebody could talk about, kind of slide it in that you have racial identification.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. NASCAR weekend in Chicago. On July 2nd, we will have our NASCAR race here in Chicago. We're all excited about it. 4th of July next week as well, at the beginning of the week. But we're talking about affirmative action. Indeed, we've had a robust conversation with Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Attorney Darrell Jones. Congressman Jonathan Jackson has been laying out for us just what affirmative action is, what it means, what the remedies are in this situation. He's also helped us to see how this can play out, Congressman Jackson. I mean, this can play out not just in government contracts and in private business, but with HBCUs, which, you know, this is a lot. And then, of course, you're on the agricultural committee, and you see the impact of multi-generational wealth and poverty. I mean, coming out of slavery, Black people had 14 million acres of land. Now we're 90% of the way down. We have under 1.4 million acres of land. Unbelievable. So, and you're saying, Congressman, that there have been specific harms to Black people, so we need specific remedies for Black people. And you really see this you see Black men in particular taking a real hit, Congressman Jackson.
Yeah, Santita, what's going to happen is the way the federal government works, it's going to distribute money to the states. The states are now predominantly controlled, 30 states, by Republican executive branch governors / legislators, upper and lower house, and passing the rules, the laws that they want, be it for voting. It's been restrictive. Thank God we had a bit of a breather with the Supreme Court. But on women's reproductive issues, they're banning books, so you can't even understand the history of the killing mockingbird. They laid this out pretty clearly on people that'll steal from Black folks. But now children can't even get introduced to Kill a Mockingbird. And the same thing will happen with the Black colleges. And if you're an administrator and you think you're going to be personally sued, you would just rather stay away from it. This is a problem. You don't have the benefit and the protection of the law. When the law is this capricious and this whimsical, it sends fear throughout the whole system. Now, if you think you could be, if you think you're an administrator and you could potentially be sued to doing something that's race-based, meaning being fair to blacks or pulling them in, I don't want to get sued. So it's just a chilling effect when people just go hands off because they don't want to be sued. And we're back to lack of protection.
Lack of protection. I want to go around the panel and talk about that. Attorney Jones, it's lack of protection. Now people, because you see the chilling effect that these book bans have had. And, and the critical race theory, teachers like, I don't want to get fired. I don't know what to say. Here we are, Attorney Jones.
No, you're absolutely, on point. And what you're going to, what we're beginning to see happening, and particularly in states like Florida, where we just came out of, Florida with the big rolling protests we did down there. What you're beginning to see is that the teachers don't know what they can teach in the classroom. They have to remove certain books from the classroom. And when you start this process of removing books and removing history, of removing books that teach self-awareness, self-importance, self-acceptance, all those things that are there, just yourself being present in history, yourself being present and valued in the present. What then begins to happen is that the teachers begin to say, I don't need this. I can go to a state where I can teach freely and I can teach openly and the kids can learn everything they need to learn. So a large part of that, I think, is part of what the problem is with this U.S. Supreme Court. Because, when we sit and we look at, and one of the things that we haven't touched on with the Supreme Court decision is where the plaintiffs in this case, or, the students for fair admissions, they weren't really, all the Asian students that folks are thinking about. They were white students. And this students for fair admissions, they just came together for the purpose of this case. This wasn't some long-standing organizational piece. So there was a whole standing argument that the court just punted on, not questioning whether or not this was really a legitimate entity that was before the court. But I say that to say that when we start the process of bringing all of this information together, what we're going to see happening is that if we continue down this road that the Supreme Court has opened here with regards to allowing, the differences, to the diversity to not really be a focus and a piece of the culture that goes into our school systems, into our teaching, that what we're eventually going to happen is that we're not going to have that opportunity to learn and to know our history and to know our past, and who knows where that leads. In the state of Florida, we see where it's leading. Teachers are going to be leaving the state of Florida to go to states where they can learn. Students are not going to want to go to the University of Florida because they're going to be limited as to what they can learn. So it's a real dangerous road that the Supreme Court here has carved out when we start trying to say that you no longer really have to consider race with regards to the admissions and all, or you can't consider race with regards to the admissions practice and what that could mean to our society as a whole, and particularly the multicultural aspects to it, Santita.
Dwight McKee, and we keep hearing that, back in the civil rights days, we're right in the middle of it, Dwight McKee.
The single largest affirmative action situation in the United States was when Abraham Lincoln set up the Homestead Act in 1862, and he gave the 300,000 immigrants, European immigrants, white European immigrants, land grants to 160, 180 acres if they just worked the land for 5 years. It was theirs. And it's how they settled the western part of the United States. So when these people talk about they don't understand affirmative action, that's not true. They've been the benefactors, the beneficiaries of affirmative action. They don't understand it when it comes to us because they ain't trying to understand. What they're trying to do is maintain a competitive advantage. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when he blew us and played college basketball, he was the most dominant player in the history of basketball. Beat up on all of the little small white guys. So what do? They outlawed the dunk. While he played, they outlawed the dunk. When Bob Gibson was striking out all of the white ball players, they lowered the mound. I mean, the rules is about how they can stay in charge, and they adjust the rules when it's convenient. And until again, we understand that their strategy is to give it and then take away, that we have a false hope and then despair, and it goes from affirmative action to affirmative reaction. So we understand it's a game that they play. We will always be in a situation to believe that they're going to do better. They're not. And that's why I say we have to focus on our own institutions. We have to invest in ourselves. We have to use our tax money to our advantage. And we have to understand that if your father used to say that nobody's going to save us but us.
That's true. Reverend Wilson, your thoughts about where we go from here?
Well, I think that I was listening to Congressman Jackson, and I think there are some legislative remedies that we need to be looking at the federal and at the state level. One of the things that African Americans have become complacent. You know, everybody says, as Santita, you said earlier, back in the civil rights state, we've never left it. And we have stopped struggling and pushing against, yes, we need to fight for reparations, but we also must change and focus on electing and controlling state legislative bodies, because they're passing these rules that impact us in education, that impact us in the workplace, everywhere, impact our voting rights. That's one. We also need to be pushing our United States representatives and our U.S. senators to make sure that they are pushing the agenda for us. We have yet to keep demanding that these Supreme Court justices who are operating contrary to the law, that are operating in an illegal manner, be investigated and removed from the court. Clarence Thomas, Alito, many of them in the majority. We need to be pushing for their removal based on their personal, private actions that have impacted Supreme Court decisions, because they are being controlled by people who give them money, give them gifts, and you can't do that in any other level of government. The highest court of the land is just despicable.
Well, hold
so
that thought.
Clarence is...
No, hold that thought. Congressman Jackson, are you still there?
Yes, I have to go get a donut so I can relax. This is so
Just don't forget about my mac and cheese today. I don't want you to fall into a sugar coma.
Thank you. I want the listeners to know there is good news. We will overcome this.
I'm like, you better just don't you get sick on that donut. I want my macaroni and cheese. He asked me last night, you want me to do anything for you? Want me to make you anything? I'm like, because he can cook everything. He's
What
great.
about the sweet potato pie?
No, whatever. I told him, I said, whatever you make for me, I'm going to be happy, because it's not going to bother my stomach. I'm going to eat it. But,
he makes sweet potato pies.
And fried fish. And
that's what I'm talking about.
He could do that. But, Congressman, what about these Supreme Court justices? A lot of their ethical breaches, at least as laypersons, because they oversee themselves. I've never heard of anything like that. That's insane.
They just do what they want to do.
They just do what they want to do. Is there anything we can do about these people? Anything?
Sure. As written in the law, no. It's kind of like it's hard to overturn something if you're not looking for the crime and not looking for the to fight back on it. And tell you what they've done is absolutely reprehensible. Clarence Thomas, you ever heard of gift taxes? When somebody flies you someplace and no, it's just so wrong. But, we've never had a Bastille Day in this country where the Constitution was really looked at very, very critically. And unfortunately, it comes out of the bunch of slaveholders and slave owners and their descendants, and they've not taken a clean, hard look at the ethical conflicts that a Chief Justice can have. Was that help me out, Reverend Wilson, was that Gorsuch that was working prior comments against affirmative action? Was he the solicitor? Yes. I mean, so here you had somebody that voted that was the solicitor that was fighting against affirmative action before he was appointed to the Supreme Court. And Ketanji Brown recuses herself from voting, so the vote was 6-2. She recused herself because she has a higher ethical standard, and she recused herself simply because she went to Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the vote is 6-2. It's not 6-3.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got justices that are profiting from decisions that they are making, and people that were clearly anti the affirmative action that are voting against it.
Absolutely.
As a chief justice.
When you look, it's incredible. When you look at the Chief Justice Roberts, he has unethical conduct as well. And they use their wives as shields.
$10 million. What?
Stay with me.
Oh.
Stay with. So,
wow.
Talk about legacy.
I mean, Reverend Dr. Yeri, what?
So let's kind of frame this around the investment in Black institutions, the affirmation of Black competency, if you will, right? This notion that you have to prove your worth to be included in white-controlled spaces. This conversation about, where do these schools come in, these private schools? UNC, first public university, its law school was not integrated by law until the 1960s. That I ain't say the 1860s, the first public university. That when we look at the Southern Regional Education Compact, which Southern governors came together because as we began to see the landscape change under the old separate but equal doctrine, as it was beginning to unravel in these challenges in the South beginning in the early 1930s in higher education. What we saw was that the governors decided, since we don't have the money to invest in bringing these facilities up to standard, what we will do is we will agree to protect white access by sending Black students that would otherwise be qualified that we don't want anyway. We will send them to the north where they will be accepted. And so they made it possible to pay the tuition. So a lot of educators, it was interesting when I first came to Baltimore, a lot of my senior members who are educators ended up with their master's degrees, their graduate degree from Temple, from New York University, because they could not go to the University of Maryland. Let's be real clear that this notion, to Big Brother Dwight's point, has always been this orchestration not to protect access, but to protect whiteness. And whiteness is still the exclusive club. White women claim whiteness. They defend and protect white male entitlement because that's the way they get their access. So they benefit from it. To the military question, the reason the military is asserting that we got to have affirmative action is that if we don't, we lose 1/5 of our ranks. Just like that. They gone. We got to remember, as Reverend reminds us all the time, had there not been an Emancipation Proclamation that made it possible for Black folks to be able to join the Union Army, that the war would have turned out differently. That at the end of the day, Black participation in the defense of the nation in ways that white folks in the nation are not even inclined to do is a byproduct of the blood, sweat, actual blood, sweat, and tears of Black folk. And at this point, if somebody says to me, I don't see why I need to vote, it's because if you don't vote, there's going to be some governor, some executive in some place that's going to make an appointment to a vacancy on the bench. 97% of the decisions that come out of courts come out of state courts. Very few of them make it up through the federal ranks. And at the end of the day, what we're finding is this dismantling from the top this reorganization from what we might call the bottom at the state level. And so we're getting squeezed in the middle. And so if we don't pay attention, if there's not a revolt at the ballot box this November and every other election cycle that flows from it, I don't care if they elected dog catcher or air monitor. It does not matter. If we are not engaged in that process, then we are consenting to the demise of our people by these de jure acts that are coming out of these processes. And so we've got to demand that public money goes equally. Since there's no racial consideration, then there should be no distinction. The public white institution should not get more money than the public black institution, because Maryland has 4 public HBCUs. So let's go back and look at how are you funding higher ed? How are you funding the private HBCU? If there's no distinction, that it shouldn't be I get less because I'm a private and you have a public. They've already watched that thing. So we've got to make sure that the rules that they are changing, we make sure that if that's the argument you're making, if that's the assertion that you're presenting, then we no longer will take this false justification that somehow or other we should be given less by a rationale that you have just invalidated. I don't care. Clarence Thomas, he can count. He knows how to number. He doesn't understand the nuance of the argument. He argues with Justice Jackson in a footnote that when she talks about how out of 67 black applicants, 65 of them were not accepted, that met the qualifications at UNC, and that then in the course of, that were accepted, 2 were not. There were almost 1,200 Asian applicants. 1,118 of them got in. And the distinction in terms of the percentage, Justice Clarence Thomas says that this is an argument about a difference of 2. No, it's a difference of almost 1,000. You had 67 qualified black students in state that said it, 1,200 agents, and yet somehow or other we are led to believe that of the 65 that got in, the 65 agents who didn't get in were somehow put at a disadvantage. Something's wrong in the analysis and the calculus, because the analytics we bring to this are distorted, and they're distorted very often. I thank God for the wisdom of a black woman to wag her finger at that joker on that court and to put it in a way that he cannot misunderstand, because if we don't fight this battle, even when the numbers are not in our favor, we're going to consent to the abuses that are going to be imposed on the generation yet unborn. We will die before we see the effects of what happened on yesterday, unless we begin to push back. That's why you got to be in Chicago on July 15th. You got to stay in Chicago until the conversation is over, and you got to be willing to do your part long after the convention adjourns. Otherwise, the new slavery ain't coming with shackles. You ain't walking down the street with shackles. Well, unless you get caught up in the prison industrial complex, which is resurging. But the truth of the matter is, the new slavery is spatial control. Where can you be as a black person in this country? It still has to come with white approval by way of a white process.
Congressman Jackson, I've got about 2 minutes. We're on the precipice of the 4th of July weekend, and now this. It seems that we're at an inflection point in this nation about where we go from here. Dr. King asked, your godfather asked that question prophetically more than 50 years ago. Where do we go from here, Congressman?
Well, Santita, first, I've got to thank WCPT and your radio program, because where can we get this sort of information? And so this is going to be a continuation. But seriously, honestly, thank you. Thank the owners of CPT for granting us this much airtime. Our airtime, we've gotten bad information. Please replay what Reverend Todd Urey just said. Please replay what Brother Dwight McKee and what Reverend Jeanette Wilson has just said. These laws have been upheld for affirmative action. It's an effective tool to bring growth and inclusion. It's used in the military. African Americans are 13% of the U.S. population, over 20% of the armed services. They said, how do we attract a vibrant workforce in this voluntary military if we don't have leadership that reflects the people that are coming in? The universities have used this, corporate America has used this, and the very with an arbitrary, capricious, and recklessness, the Supreme Court has said no for higher education. Why are they attacking higher education and removing the only tool they have to bring about this sort of inclusivity to make America better? Why are they attacking books going into libraries? Why are they attacking women's reproductive freedoms and access to their health care? It's the same, if you will, spiritual great-grandchildren of those slave masters and Confederates that don't want to see America live up to its potential. And I rest.
Amen, amen, amen. Stay right here, everybody.
Unbroken continuity. Love you, Santita. I love you all.
I love you. I love you. And everybody go to get some closing thoughts from Daryl Jones and Dwight McKee, Reverend Jeanette Wilson.
And listen to Daryl Jones. Thank you, Brother Daryl. I'm sorry, Daryl. I miss you. Okay, champ. Thanks, Daryl.
We're trying to get everybody in. So stay right here, everybody. I want you to have a safe 4th of July weekend. And freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Yeah, we're going to get there, but we have to fight for it. This is not a constitutional monarchy. It's a constitutional republic, which means you have skin in the game. You always have skin in the game, no matter what the government is. But this government is up for and by you. Doesn't feel like it always, but I promise you, it's built on your back. And in fact, we built it. Black Americans built this country. We built it. And we are going to get what we need from it. And when America is fair to indigenous people, to Black people, to everyone who's lived under the boot, America gets better. America gets right. It gets right. And that is really the point. We want America to be what it's supposed to be. And if America is what it's supposed to be, then everybody has an opportunity to be actualized, to become who they're supposed to be. And that's the way the world as it should be. I love you, everybody. Cannot wait to be with you next week, but have a wonderful holiday weekend. Stay here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel so you can hear from the brilliant Daryl Jones, Todd Yeary, Dwight McKee, Jeanette Wilson. Thank you, Congressman Jackson, for being with us. Don't forget my macaroni and cheese today, my brother. Thank you, Henry, for a great show. Thank you, WCPT, for this space. Sending everyone so much love. Fred Eichner, Katie, Matt, Mark, Melissa, all y'all, Steve. I love you all. God bless you, my family did. Devin and Vidalia and Paul and oh my goodness, so many. And of course, Alex is with me just about every day. I love everybody. God bless you. Happy 4th of July. Well, Daryl, we've said a lot today. Is there anything else you'd like to add? There's just a whole lot here.
No, I agree with you. A lot of ground was covered. And I think the one thing that I just wanted to emphasize is being certain we understand how we got to the point of having this supermajority conservative Supreme Court. And it really came because of missed votes and missed opportunities. And, that presidential election where we went through with former President Trump and the number of people that were fighting as to whether or not who they were going to vote for, will they come out and vote for, in that election for Clinton versus Trump at that election. That was huge. That was huge. And so, it really just, in my mind, emphasized the importance of voting because it all came down to who became president, who was able to select the people that sat on that Supreme Court that have made the decisions for us in this horrible decision that just occurred. Again, I said it, and I'll say it again. This Supreme Court that we currently have is a Supreme Court that was selected by a minority of the voters in the country. They do not represent the popular vote in terms of their numbers, and that's what we're seeing come out of this court. And these are the type of decisions that come when you have that type of court in place. So that's as I see it right now, Santita. We've got to be certain that we continue to push to get people out there and get our folks voting, and so that our community is well represented.
And then push the party to do what we need them to do, Daryl, because the fact is we do vote. We vote. The parties, the Democrats in particular, get a little skittish once they get in. Well, let me tell you why. No. We have to. The voting is the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. After you voted, then okay, get your person in. Now you got to really fight. Now you got a fight on your hands because this person has all these other interests, including maybe their even their personal druthers, Daryl, that they're fighting against. But we have to do. There's work that we have to continue to do because voting is not the end. Oh no! You got to keep on going. You must keep on going. Jeanette, I was about to call you Jeanette McKee. Ow! Not.
Oh no! No!
Oh, sorry. Woo!
Oh Lordy.
Okay. It's only because we know and love Dwight.
We do. I think this decision really is a real fervent call to action for students, for lawyers, for parents, for workers, for all of us, because one of the things that we must know is this United States Supreme Court is not the court that we dream that it is, that it should be. It is a court that is led by a majority of unethical justices who enter rulings that benefit the party or the persons that nominated and approved their appointments. And we have to be very clear on that. And so we must become more vigilant than ever before. We must organize state by state, county by county, congressional district by congressional district, so that as we march to the polls in 2024, we are very clear. We're not just electing a president, we're electing people that will represent an ideology that will either cause us to live freely, more freely in this country, or restrict our rights, voting rights, will restrict our access to a high-quality education, or a country that will restrict our access to a livable wage and diversity and equity in the workplace. So there's a lot at stake, and that's why this year everyone should consider pressing themselves and pressing their way to the Rainbow Push Convention. Why? Because we're looking at a journey, the perilous journey, from freedom to equality. And we're still on that journey. I want you to come and join us July the 15th through the 19th. You'll hear some of the successes we have, and we're going to analyze in greater detail this Supreme Court and its impact on our lives from now to then. And we'll be talking about where do we go from here? Is it chaos or community?
Where do we go
But
from
remember,
here?
the arc of the universe bends towards justice, and that's what we're fighting for.
Absolutely. May you be on the other side of that, everybody. You don't want to get cut on the wrong side of that. Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, the reason they wanted to protect the legacy part of that argument is because, and I predict that in 10 years, the Asian community will dominate all the key positions in education, in medicine, and in law and technology, as the Jewish community in the 20s and the 30s. The reason they passed these affirmative laws in the first place, the reason they started imposing quota systems, is because the Jewish community dominated the liberal arts and the sciences in the 20s and the 30s. They were 2% of the population, but had 15 and 20% of the positions in these Ivy League colleges, and these WASPs couldn't participate. And so they began to impose quota on Jewish admission, so that they would only have a certain amount of positions, because nobody else, the other whites, could not participate, could not compete with them. And so they had to reduce their numbers to increase their own, which is why Bach and them raised the issue in the first place, because they understood that they were victimized by quotas. For us, they then used us to justify what they had done to the Jewish community. Now they're using the Asians to justify what they've done to us. But I think at some point that's going to backfire you too. That if they all things being equal, I think you're going to see the rest of the country look like High Park and the University of Chicago in 10 years.
Well, let me tell you something.
Because they just...
to interrupt, Dwight, there's a real fight in the AAPI community about this. Some of the most progressive activists in America are from the Asian community. The whole Asian community did not sign on to this, just like we have a lot of Clarence Thomas's, Jeanette, in the Black community. So I keep emphasizing that because it's true. It's just the truth. We need to understand that the brilliant point that Dwight, that you are making, is that they continue to shift this around to exclude Jewish people, Black people, brown people, women, but the only people who are protected are white men. Dwight, they're protected.
The only one.
I'll just keep on.
The only ones that are protected, and it's designed to be so. And so I'm going to disclose by saying that the Supreme Court made these decisions because they were put there to make these decisions. The reason the people voted for Trump in the first place is with the understanding that he would put people in play who would make these decisions. So these were not arbitrary decisions. Mm-hmm. These were really a precursor to the reason Trump was elected president. It was set up for that, for a time such as this. And it's going to keep playing itself out at this level as more and more decisions come about. Because again, these people didn't steal this country just to give it away. They stole it to hold on to. And they're going to hold on to it by any means necessary.
Henry, mute him, please. Lord have mercy. Stolen land. Oh, it's only the truth. Reverend Dr. Yeary, I hadn't forgotten about you. Your closing thoughts for us today?
There are many of them. There's a lot of work to do. I think as I was listening to Big Brother Dwight talk and this notion of a design, I'm going to mention a name. It should bring back a discussion. Steve King, former congressman from Iowa. He was very clear that he did not believe the browning of America was going to take place, that there would be resistance. I don't think that was just a slip of the tongue. I think it was a tell that there would be an absolute fight. So what do you have? You have white male control over women's reproductive rights, women's reproductive health. You have the Southern Baptist Convention saying women cannot lead our congregations. Southern Baptist Convention formed out of the dispute over slavery. You have this Supreme Court ruling, along with others that have been very precise and selective about where they choose to dismantle, right? Shelby decision going after voting rights and pre-clearance. The Dobbs decision a year ago. We now have the UNC Harvard decisions yesterday. What you are seeing is social engineering, what Charles Hamilton Houston warned us about, which is why in the context of litigation, legislation, and demonstration, we've got to push back. That's why coming together is clear, right? Coming to Chicago July 15th through the 19th is important. But it's the starting point. It's not to be viewed as an event. It should be viewed as an opportunity to begin an ongoing process of resilience that will help us to resist this onslaught from the ideological court that we now find ourselves defending ourselves against. And so when we get to this conversation about who's going to get elected next year, 33 senators will be on the ballot. Who controls who gets on the federal bench will be determined in 2024. That's going to make a big deal, not just who's going to sit in the Oval Office. That matters a whole lot, who presents the names. But if there had been a different makeup in the Senate, going all the way back to when Justice Scalia died before the end of Barack Obama's second term, if there had been a different makeup in the Senate, if there had been more engagement around what needed to take place in this process of protecting the interest of our people, the agenda, what's on the agenda, not by personality, but by policy. This isn't a who you like contest, who's going to sell the most tickets to be able to win the crown. This is who's going to be in positions of authority to make decisions that affect my day-to-day reality. That's what this is about. And if we don't make sure, check your voter registration. Start checking it now. If you're not registered to vote, register now. Don't wait until you think it's close enough to be able to get to the election. If you are turning 18 before Election Day this year, forget next year, register now. Let's get into this process, because at the end of the day, it is still a math problem. It was in the Kerner report. Black Power is demonstrating the ability to swing the outcome of elections. We can swing these elections, but we got to show up.
And there you have it, everybody. There you have it. On this 4th of July weekend, here we are, and we are about to hear about student debt relief, and on and on and on. Just remember, the most protected class of all are those who are in power, and those who were in power at the beginning of the founding of the Republic. White men, they're the ones who get into these Ivy League institutions. They over-index in terms of their admissions. The legacies, they over-index in terms of their admissions. And that's why we talk about it, because the reason they don't make the discussion is because they're the protected class. Be clear on that. That's why, no, there was more than Black folks on the docket yesterday and Asian folks on the docket. Don't misread this. This was about protecting white power as the world is moving in a whole different direction, y'all. It's just, here's this Washington Post headline: how legacy admissions to elite colleges and universities hurt students of color. How elite U.S. schools, from The Guardian, give preferences to wealthy and white legacy applicants, and how they are protected. They are the ones who are protected. They're the ones. So before we get angry with our Asian sisters, please don't do that. Some of them are misguided. Like Clarence Thomas is misguided, and dangerously so. That's why they chose him, because they knew exactly who he was, and they knew why they were going to choose him. They chose him for such a time as this. But this is about protecting those who are already in power. The New York Times article from July 13th, last year: elite colleges' quiet fight to favor alumni children. That's the fight, y'all. That's the fight, too. 3.4% of Harvard admissions for the class of 2025 were not legacies. 33% of those who were admitted, 1 out of every 3rd admission, was legacy. 43% of those who are at Harvard now are legacies. They're children of donors. They're children of the wealthy. They're athletes. Be clear on what's going on here. But oh boy, I wonder, Dwight and Jeanette and Daryl and Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, they would not do this if they sought out Black students with the same fervor with which they seek out Black athletes. It would be a different day. And the military. Oh, I can be in the bunker, but I can't be in the boardroom. I can be your cannon fodder. That is what they're saying in The Intercept. That is the headline. Affirmative action is okay if the students are getting sent to die in wars or order others to die, because the officers in our armed services come from the Ivy League. They come from colleges and universities. They're the ones who send the enlistees to die. Come on. When are you going to have enough? When you have decided that you have had enough, things will change, and not until then. Rosa Parks said, I've had enough. Fannie Lou Hamer said, I've had enough. Frederick Douglass said, enough. No, we're not going back to Africa. We're right here. You're going to do that. And then we proceeded to bury Frederick Douglass, Jeanette, for 100 years. He is more famous today than he was almost in his lifetime. So think about those things, everybody. I want you to think as the great queen of soul, the queen of all music. Aretha Franklin says to us, you better think. You better think about what you try to do to me. Remember, when you exclude me, you exclude yourself. When you diminish me, you diminish yourself. When you help me, you help yourself. When you raise me up, you lift yourself up too. That is spiritual law. Think about it, everybody. I love you, and I love you, Dwight, the birthday guy. That's right. He's had a birthday this week. Did you eat that cake, Dwight?
Jan ate it.
Yeah. Right. I'm gonna call Jan. I'm not gonna let you get away with talking about Jan like that. As much as that woman takes care of you, I'm gonna call Jan. I'm gonna call her and tell her that you said this to the audience. He got a big old thick piece of chocolate cake and he ate it himself, and he's putting it on his woman. Shame on you, ooh, Dwight. I mean, Daryl, if you do that, I'm done with you. Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, don't throw your woman under the bus. And Jeanette has already left the building. So I love you all. God bless you. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, WCPT, as Congressman Jackson said, for giving us the space to have this kind of conversation. It's so important, everybody. I love you all. Does anyone else is there anything that's been left unsaid? Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say except Dwight? Yes.
More to be said. Just on another day. We got more to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Have a great weekend.
God bless you. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend and enjoy NASCAR. It's going to be great. Remember to wear your masks outside. Wear your masks outside. You know, Dwight, I'm going to send you this story. People are posting videos online about these horrible smells that they're getting in different parts of the country with this haze. So it's begging the question, what's in the air? Because, you know, we've had these chemical spills on the trains and on and on and on that these chemicals got soaked into the ground. People are wondering, what has been stirred up here. It's something for us to think about, everybody. Something for us to think about. And that doesn't make you a conspiracist. It makes you a thinker. Don't engage in herd thinking. Where you start peeking over someone's shoulder and try to peek into someone's mind before you come up with an original thought. Think, everybody. I love you, everybody. MS said, do you think this would happen if Thomas was not on the court? Yes, they would have found another Clarence Thomas. Does anyone else want to respond to that? Dwight, Jeanette, Daryl, would this have happened had Thomas not been on the court? Anybody there? Well, let me tell you, yes. Because all they had to do was move over and find somebody else. Someone who is traitorous to their roots. They always exist. Someone who doesn't feel good about themselves, they exist. And that's what you have when you have him. And he's someone who, Percy Sutton, brilliant businessman and freedom fighter. He was Malcolm X's lawyer and my parents' lawyer as well. And he owned the most successful radio station in New York City, the number one radio station throughout the 80s, WBLS and WLIB. There was an African American who was doing some things that were very harmful to Black people, even as he was about to assume this big position. He said, have the discipline not to be angry with him. He said, because he's as much a victim of this supremacist system as we all are. Have that discipline. Take pity upon him because he doesn't think well enough of himself to fight the system. Something to think about, everybody. Think about that. And so, that's right, Jewel. Oh, Lorraine, I miss Mr. Sutton today. There are some people who I have had the privilege of knowing, and I wish I could sit and talk with them now. But you know what? They planted enough seeds for me to go back and go, oh, wow, well, they did say this. And I needed to watch out for this, that, and the other. So everybody, please take care of yourself. Sending you much love. Hope you got something great from the show today. Please like and share the show. And I love you, and I'll see you after the 4th. Take a little time off. Oh, yeah. Love you, everybody. God bless you.